Greetings, fellow blockheads. Welcome to It's a Podcast, Charlie Brown, episode number 134. My name is Bill. I'm your host. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, everybody. As this episode goes out, it's just a few days before Valentine's Day. I hope that you have figured out a way to honor your sweet baboo in whatever way is appropriate, even if your sweet baboo is yourself, right? The world's a tough place right now. A little self-babooing may not be such a bad thing. And one of the ways you can do that is by enjoying peanuts. And, one of the ways you can enjoy peanuts is by listening to this podcast. So I am happy that you have chosen to do so. I would also be thrilled if, instead of chocolates, you gave your baboo the gift of a link to this podcast. So keep that in mind. I already have a link to this podcast, so I really just want the chocolates. Dark chocolate, preferably. But, any chocolate is good chocolate. Just saying. Several years ago, I forget the name of the company, but they came out with a line of Peanuts chocolates. It was your basic chocolate candy wrapped in Peanuts character foil. And I was really hoping that was going to turn into like a regular thing. I don't think it ever did, though. I'm sure more than one company has done that, but I just was thinking of one in particular. And now I really want some chocolate, whether it looks like Peanuts characters or not. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, peanuts. Ooh, chocolate with peanuts in it is good too. Maybe I'm just hungry. It is getting to be lunchtime. All right, enough of that. We had a big show this time. They're always big. We are going to, in just a moment here, check out this month in Peanuts history. I've already tipped my hand here, right? The month is February. And then we will have a Peanuts by Schulz episode discussion. And then a discussion of Camp Snoopy, Season 1, Episode 9. And then we will get out of here because I am kind of hungry. All right. Let's get on with it.
Whether it's Beethoven's birthday or Joe Schlabotnick's retirement anniversary, you will learn about it now on This Month in Peanuts History.
All right, so February is a big month for Peanuts history. Our list begins with February 1, 1968. You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, right? The iconic musical debuted on that date in London's West End.
Oh, you're a good man, Charlie Brown. You're the kind of reminder we need. You have humility, nobility, and a sense of honor that are very rare indeed.
Harold Fielding produced the musical. It ran for 116 performances. It had already premiered in 1967 off-Broadway at Theater 80 in the East Village. It was revived later on a U.S. tour in 98, on Broadway with Kristen Chenoweth in 99. There was an off-Broadway revival in 2016. Oh, and a 2008 Manhattan benefit concert for one night only. Music and lyrics by Clark Gesner, and in the 99 revision by Andrew Lippa. It's been produced endlessly by amateur theater, right? Small cast, simple staging, and it's Peanuts, so you're always going to get people to come out. The off-Broadway cast recording was originally released on MGM Records, remastered later by Decca Broadway Universal Classics, and re-released on September 31, 2000. The 1970 U.S. tour lasted 202 performances on the road. The London West End performance closed on May 11, 68. The whole original Toronto cast reprised their roles for the West End performances. Don Potter, who portrayed Snoopy, reprised his role in the original San Francisco cast of Snoopy the Musical. If anyone listening by chance saw You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown in London's West End in 68, I'd be thrilled to hear what you thought of it at the time and what you think of it now, looking back on it. February 7th, 1951, Violet Grey first appeared. This was, of course, just a few months after the strip had premiered, so the Peanuts kids look very toddler-ish. In that strip, we see a little girl with pigtails talking to a very puppyish looking dog, and Charlie Brown watching them. The little girl says, "Well, hello there. You don't know me, do you? My name is Violet." And for some reason, when Schulz did the word balloon here, he put Violet in quotes. And then Charlie Brown just coughs. "Ahem. You're real cute," Violet says to Snoopy. "Ahem," Charlie Brown says a little louder. And then we see Violet in the last panel has left the scene. Little Snoopy has little hearts over his head. Charlie Brown's like, "Well, why didn't you introduce me?" So early days, Charlie Brown was kind of a player, a little bit. Early days of Peanuts, of course, is interesting. Got Shermie, Patty, Charlie Brown, Snoopy. That's about it. And now Violet shows up in 51. I was listening to Unpacking Peanuts the other day. They were commenting that early days of Peanuts was almost kind of a romantic comedy with Patty and Shermy, and Charlie Brown was kind of a supporting character. And at some point, he becomes the main character. And I think Violet is just sort of added into the mix here. I think there is something to that point, and I think in 51 now, Violet's added into that mix. Of course, Violet and Patty, original Patty, not Peppermint Patty, were main characters for a while, and then sort of became background players. I think because they have, like, no soul. I said that once. That's a little harsh, but it's also kind of true. They're really, after a while, they just sort of become, their whole point is to say snarky things. Enter the scene, say something snarky, and then leave. So at some point, it seems like Schulz ran out of things to do with them. The next day, in the strip, Charlie Brown actually does get to introduce himself to Violet, offers to carry her books. This was a thing back in the day, right? In school, little boys would offer to carry the girls' books. I don't think that's a thing people do anymore. Girls can carry their own books. But Violet in the strip is like, no, I already have someone. And in the last strip, Snoopy is holding a little strap that, also back in the day, instead of a book bag, the kids in school would just wrap this leather strap around their books. And so that's what Snoopy's using to carry them. Charlie Brown's like, foiled, and by man's best friend. And then I guess we're done with Violet for the time being, because the next strip after that is Shermy and Patty squabbling. So there you go. February 7th, 1951, Violet makes her debut. February 12th, 2000, rough day, Peanuts history, Charles Schulz passed away. February 13th, 2000, the last Peanuts strip ran, which is particularly poignant this year, of course, 2025, is the 75th anniversary of the debut of Peanuts, or will be in October. So noting this, the last strip running February 13, 2000 is a big deal. February 14, 1994, Andy debuts in the strip, one of Snoopy's many siblings. We see Sally waking Charlie Brown up early in the morning. Big brother, wake up, your dog is in the hospital. Dad took him in early this morning. Charlie Brown quickly gets dressed, rushes out to the hospital. Yes, ma'am, his name is Snoopy. Visitors? He already has some visitors? And then the last panel. This is an interesting 4-panel strip. The first 3 are super narrow panels, and the last panel is about the same width as 2 regular comic strip panels. And it's a shot of Snoopy asleep in a hospital bed with an IV drip, and by his bedside, 3 dogs. There's Andy, Olaf, and Spike. So yeah, Spike is the sort of scruffy-looking one. Or Andy. Andy is sort of the scruffy-looking one. Spike, of course, has the scraggly mustache and the hat. Olaf is the sort of pudgy one with the, I guess, like hunting cap kind of thing. Charlie Brown knows them all already, because the next day he speaks to them by name. Andy explains that they knew Snoopy was sick and how to get there because animals have an instinct about these things. Spike says, we go by instinct. Olaf says, a lot of it was luck. So there you go. February 14th, 94, Andy is introduced. Charles Schulz often grumbled about his regret with introducing siblings for Snoopy, and yet he doesn't seem to have been able to stop himself because he ended up introducing 5 of them. Quick, name them. All right, Spike, Olaf, Andy, Marbles, Bell. February 14th, 1971, the original off-Broadway production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown ended its 1,597 performance run at Theater 80 in the East Village of New York. If anyone was at one of those off-Broadway performances in 71, let me know that too. You know what? If you've seen a production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown at any point in your life, let me know what you thought of it. February 23rd, 1940. Jean Schulz, wife to Charles Schulz, awesome ambassador for the Schulz legacy, was born. February 23rd, 1940. So happy almost birthday to Jean Schulz. February 29th, 1988, Peanuts is no longer relegated to the space saver dimensions, the strip we're talking about. It was originally designed to have, because back in the day, comic strips were filler, basically. At that point in 88, it becomes sort of a standard size comic strip, disposing of the strict 4-frame format. This allows Schulz to change things up a bit with the layout of the panels, often meaning he would do 3 panels instead of the standard 4. I kind of alluded to that talking about the Andy strip, because it was still 4 panels, but 3 of them were much narrower. Usually it would be 4 uniformly sized panels. In that Andy strip, it was 3 pretty narrow panels and one double-sized panel. At that point in 88, Schulz started playing around with, sometimes 3 panels, sometimes 2 panels. Once in a great while, he might do a strip that's just one big panel. I think he did that on the anniversary of D-Day at least once, that kind of thing. If there's a strip, I think with a dinosaur in it, that's a reduced number of panels. So he started playing around with some of that, which as an artist has to be fun, to be freed up a little bit. Even though Schulz always pictured the strip as being not art, as being sort of a commercial thing to fill space in a newspaper. That was the whole job. He was cool with that. He's still an artist, and at some point it had to be nice to be sort of freed up to kind of play with that format a little bit. And, starting in 88, he had that freedom. And that is the end of this month in Peanuts history. As always, if you guys have suggestions for things in and around the Peanuts universe that I have not included on the This Month in Peanuts History list that you think should be there, because I'm sure there are things, point them out to me, and maybe I will put them on the list. charliebrownpodcast@gmail.com.
Whether it's Beethoven's birthday or Joe Schlabotnick's retirement anniversary, you will learn about it now on This Month in Peanuts History.
A person I once knew, while complaining about someone she was arguing with, threw up her hands and said, "He must think I live in a carnival-like atmosphere of glee." Upset as this person was, though, I always thought this sounded like kind of a cool state to live in. Well, I'm not there yet, but I've got a website, carnivalofgleecreations.com, and there's stuff on there, everything you can want, like the podcast Atari Bytes, featuring old games and original short stories that are pretty unrelated. And my other podcast, it's a podcast, Charlie Brown, covering anything and everything in and around the iconic Peanuts comic strip. If the printed word is more your thing, there are books on there too, like The Novel in the Saint Nick of Time and short story collections Misery Banana, Hell's Cereal, and Second Duck on the Right. Want to know what else I'm up to? That's all there too. carnivalofgleecreations.com. Everything you need. Glee not included. Way back in 2014, Peanuts Worldwide and French television got together to toast how France and Europe and America would always be friends forever and would continue to make great projects together that would make people happy, like Peanuts, and never ever would argue about things and, well, anyway. So they created a thing called Peanuts by Schulz, because even though they really wanted to work together and create a thing, titles maybe not their strong suit, but it's easy to identify. And we check out one of these episodes, usually about once a month here on the podcast. They are 6, 7, sometimes 8-minute episodes, but pretty much around the 7-minute mark. The one we're going to talk about today is 7 minutes, 10 seconds. It's called Misunderstanding, and it opens, as they all do, with the bouncy Peanuts by Schulz theme, which sounds nothing like Guaraldi music, culminating, as they all do, with a little what I call a sepia tone comic strip panel, giving us a hint what the episode's going to be, and a little voiceover with, again, another hint. This one is a shot of Marcy's face inside a Valentine heart with lace all around it. And the voiceover, I believe, is Charlie Brown, which is odd because, spoiler, Charlie Brown doesn't actually appear in the episode. It's The voiceover is Charlie Brown saying, "Today there seems to be some sort of misunderstanding." So the episode opens with Marcy and Peppermint Patty. In fact, there are only 3 characters in the entire 7-minute, 10-second episode. Peppermint Patty, Marcy, and a kid we'll get to in a minute. So Peppermint Patty and Marcy are on a bus, which I thought at first was a school bus, and it's driving through the woods, which is I made a note of because every time on Peanuts by Schulz there's a shot of the kids on the bus going somewhere, they're always driving through the woods. Every road in Peanuts Town is, blazoned, is that a word? Sure, why not? Blazoned through the woods. They're never like driving through town or down, past, the office park or, the shopping mall. They're never going by that, or even usually the bus really isn't ever usually by school. It's always driving through on a road, but through a wooded area. So I made a note of that. Here, though, maybe it's kind of relevant because it's not a school bus. It's the bus to camp, but it's not the other Peanuts kids. It's just Marcy and Peppermint Patty. No sailor hats, by the way, yet. Actually, there's no sailor hats in this one. I'm thinking of Camp Snoopy. So Peppermint Patty and Marcy are on the bus. Peppermint Patty is sitting in one seat, kind of head back, like she's dozing a little bit maybe. Marcy's in the seat behind her, and she's telling Peppermint Patty, well, she's looking, in the first shot, she's looking out the window, like maybe a little forlornly. She asks Peppermint Patty how much farther to camp. Peppermint Patty says it's about an hour, Marcy, and then she complains that the kid behind her, who we don't actually see, called her a funny name, called Marcy a funny name. Peppermint Patty, without moving, just says, tell him to keep quiet or I'll crack his binding and dim his outlook. And at this point is when I started to feel like they cribbed that joke from somewhere in the strip, which is no great shock, of course, because these all come from the strip, and I'll get to that again in a couple of minutes. I'll crack his binding and dim his outlook, which I am totally going to put on a poster and hang in my office at work, just to set the tone for the staff. Really? You want to ask me that question again that I just explained to you yesterday? Well, check out the poster on the wall. Marcy is impressed. You have a colorful way of talking, sir. A little time goes by. Marcy complains that this kid did it again. When we get to camp, Peppermint Patty says, I'll shorten his lifespan. But then Marcy's like, it's okay, I already did it, sir. And Peppermint Patty is shocked by this. Is he okay? He might be hurt. Do we have a first aid kit on the bus? Marcy's like, well, that's what I hit him with, sir. Cut to sometime later. They're at camp. They're having lunch in the mess hall. Peppermint Patty has just inhaled everything on her tray. This camp chow is great. Now, I never went to summer camp. I did like day camp stuff. But for that, you just pack a lunch in the morning. Your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and Twinkie and potato chips, because this would have been the 70s. And that's how moms pack lunch then. Maybe still do. I don't know. My kid frequently eats potato chips for lunch, which probably says something bad about me. And that's another story. But anyway, so Peppermint Patty's really into her lunch. Marcy's complaining because that kid is calling her names again, and she's not eating. Peppermint Patty's like, he upset you so much you can't eat? Marcy's like, no, I hit him with my lunch tray. Later that night, Peppermint Patty and Marcy are in their bunks, but Peppermint Patty can't sleep because she hears something scratching outside. Marcy thinks that it's the kid who's been calling her names. Peppermint Patty's like, okay, if he tries to scratch his way in here, I'll break all his arms. He's not scratching to get in, Marcy says. I pushed him into the poison oak. So this episode is setting a tone here where Marcy is not running to Peppermint Patty to do her fighting for her. Something about this particular kid has her so incensed that Marcy is stepping away from her usual pacifist stance to take it on herself to deal with it. The internet says, by the way, that poison ivy and poison oak are similar looking plants that can cause allergic reactions. Both contain urushiol, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, oil, which causes an itchy rash when it touches the skin. That would explain the scratching. Poison ivy can have white berries. Poison oak can have white or yellow berries. The leaflets of poison oak have hair on both sides. Poison oak is generally a duller green than poison ivy. Seek medical attention if you experience a rash that persists or worsens. Seek medical attention if you experience blisters, fever, swelling, or difficulty breathing. I've always kind of understood, though I'm not sure why, and the internet's not telling me in my very superficial research here, I've always had the sense that poison oak was more serious than poison ivy, but I could be wrong about that. I've never had either one. If anyone has and wants to educate us on the degrees of horror experienced by ivy or oak. There's another one too, right? Sumac? That's a thing too, I think. Sumac has 7 to 13 leaflets per stem that are smooth and have pointed tips, as opposed to the, 3 on ivy or oak? So Marcy, not worried about how this kid's going to die from not being able to breathe, shoved him into the poison oak because he's been calling her names. And upon that news, we go right into one of the interludes. As we know by now, these short episodes are broken up every couple of minutes, usually twice, sometimes twice, usually 3 times, by a little interlude of Woodstock and Snoopy doing something cute. They're always tinted a particular color, which I make note of for no particular reason. This one is tinted yellow, and it's the one where Woodstock is singing his little heart out at the top of his tree, disturbing Snoopy's nap. Snoopy grabs a music note out of the air, goes over, and brains Woodstock with it. Back to the action. Marcy and Pert and Patty are now eating, I guess, dinner, maybe breakfast, really doesn't matter. They're eating something in the mess hall. Pert and Patty warns Marcy that she needs to lay off this other kid. You might end up killing him, and then you'll get thrown out of camp. For starters, she kind of recaps for us in case in the 2 minutes the episode's been running, we have forgotten. For starters, you hit him with a first aid kit. Then you clobbered him with a lunch tray. And there's some animation going on as she's recapping here. It's basically just lots of pow, whack kind of stuff. Comic book stuff. Although at one point, I was amused. You see a single tooth flying through the air. And then you pushed him in the water. I forgot to mention that. Although, wait, that's what my note says, but I don't think that's actually happened yet. Anyway, I did notice she doesn't mention the poison oak. But Marcy's like, but have you noticed, sir? He hasn't called me a name all day. Stop calling me sir. Where's that kid now? In the nurse's office, sir. And Marcy looks very proud of herself. If you go by the nurse's office, sir, you'll hear the names he's been calling me. I didn't quite understand that line. At this point, a boy we've not seen before approaches. He's wearing long pants and a long sleeve shirt, even though he's at summer camp. And he's got sort of spiky hair, a little bit like Linus, but shorter, like if Linus got a haircut. And the kid's like, hi, you lamb cake. I am totally going to start calling my wife lamb cake. Marcy immediately clobbers the kid. But Pert and Patty, a little bit against type, I feel like, in this episode, is like, you can't hit someone for calling you lamb cake. What about noodle neck or chowderhead? People call each other lots of strange things without being serious. All Marcy says is, well, see you, noodle neck, and walks away. The kid sits up a little bit. He's coming back to consciousness. He has a big handprint on what would be the right side of his face, his right, and he's got a footprint on his shirt. I hadn't noticed initially that Marcy also kicked him to the ground. Pert and Patty apologizes for Marcy. My friend just doesn't understand. I like your friend, the kid says. I think she's cute, sir. Don't call me sir, Pert and Patty yells, and then she herself hits him. Purple interlude now. Woodstock is gathering twigs, and we see that he has built a tower of twigs that's high enough that he can lay on top and be right at the same level as Snoopy on top of the doghouse while they take their naps. It's adorable. Pert and Patty and Marcy are fishing now, and that boy approaches them and says, hey, lamb cake. Marcy pushes him into the lake, and the boy is still just standing there in the water, doesn't try to get out. He explains that he just calls her lamb cake because he doesn't know her name, but he wants to get acquainted, and, thinks Marcy's cute. Marcy takes off her shoe and hands it to Pert and Patty. Clobber him. He's being sarcastic. I'm not sure you can pound someone just because he called you lamb cake, Pert and Patty says. Marcy says, it's just sarcasm. You can't call someone lamb cake when you know they're not a lamb cake. At this point, seeing how much Marcy is struggling with the concept that this kid likes her, I feel like I should put in a plug, a reminder that Apple TV Plus, one of its newer offerings of Peanuts animation, was a special devoted entirely to Marcy. It was called Snoopy Presents One-of-a-Kind Marcy and came out in 2023. We covered it on the podcast. Like all of the new Peanuts content, it's not classic Peanuts content, right? The look is a little bit different, the tone is slightly different, and that's just, if you're going to watch Peanuts animation, that's just something you got to deal with. But it is very, very good. I really enjoyed it. I won't go into it now, but go back and listen to that episode of the podcast and check out Snoopy Presents One-of-a-Kind Marcy on Apple TV Plus if you're able to do that, because obviously it's devoted entirely to Marcy and the layers of her personality. So it's really good. And this moment where Marcy can't grasp the idea that someone thinks she's a lamb cake when it's obvious she's not a lamb cake. So anyway. So now some time passes, Marcy's gone, Pert and Patty and this kid are now fishing. Well, Pert and Patty's fishing. The other kid's just sitting there, and he's asking, was I wrong to call your friend a lamb cake, sir? And this is a pretty good response. No, but you're wrong to call me sir. Finally, we get the boy's name. His name is Floyd. He's like, I think I'm in love with Marcy. Well, Floyd, Pert and Patty says, love can be kind of painful. And if anyone knows that, by the way, it's Pert and Patty, right? All of her agonies over Chuck. Just then, Marcy appears behind them from behind a rock with a big grin on her face. She is poised to strike. But we go right into an interlude instead. World-famous author Snoopy is typing away, but he keeps discarding rejected papers. Crumples them up, throws them over his shoulder onto the ground. Woodstock is collecting them all and turns them into a new nest. Back to the action. Floyd is at the bus stop, the bus pickup at camp. His group of campers is done, so he's got to go home. And he's preparing to get on the bus, so he says goodbye to Pert and Patty, and then he says, bye, lamb cake. And Marcy's about to smack him. Pert and Patty grabs her arm, but she does kind of agree. Patty does that, hey, Floyd, it's really not nice to call her lamb cake when you're leaving forever. Floyd is like, but I don't want it to be forever. I want to see her again. I think she's cute. Patty's like, well, what do you say to that, Marcy? Punch him in the nose. He's being sarcastic. Floyd suggested taking their picture together, and suddenly he produces a camera from somewhere, tosses it to Permit Patty, and then he's like to Marcy, here, we could be in this picture, we could have our arms around each other. And just as the flash goes off on the camera, Marcy clobbers Floyd. Now he's laying on the sidewalk with a handprint on the other side of his face, and then I thought it was a pretty good line. Permit Patty, still holding the camera, is like, how about another one for the insurance company? Floyd gets on the bus, and to Marcy, he's like, can I at least write to you? Write all you want, I won't answer. But I don't know your last name or address, Floyd says. By the way, in the Peanuts movie, they declare that Marcy's last name is Carlin. I don't know if that would be considered canon. The Peanuts wiki says that her last name is either Carlin or Johnson, because in the special You're in the Super Bowl, Charlie Brown, it's Johnson. And then in the Peanuts movie, it's Carlin. A storyboard for the film, the Peanuts movie, gives her surname as Ahrens, Ahrens, named after her first voice actor, Jimmy Ahrens, from 73 to 77. So Floyd is, the bus is pulling away, doesn't know her last name, and Marcy's like, that's the way it goes, lamb cake, and the bus pulls away. Patty's like, you're weird, Marcy. That night, they're lying in their bunks, and Patty's like, I think Floyd really liked you. Marcy's like, I've never had a dog, or a cat, or a horse, or a hamster. I'm not ready for a boyfriend. This did remind me, and I noticed it early in the episode, that first scene when they were in their bunks. Now again, here, over her bunk on the wall, Marcy has a picture of a horse. I don't know whether that suggests something about her psyche. She's really into horses. In reality, does she actually own a horse? Is this her horse? And she's lying. She does, in fact, own a horse. Her family does. Or does she just really like horses, and so much she's got one up on the wall? Little steps. Putting a picture up on the wall. Maybe, next up is a picture of Floyd. Patty did take some pictures of Floyd. We never see her give the camera back to Floyd. Did she straight up steal Floyd's camera? I don't know. Interesting. So she's never had a dog or a cat or a horse or a hamster. You're weird, Marcy, Patty says. Everything in its time, Marcy says. Good night, sir. So she's leaving the door open. Maybe someday she'll be up for a boyfriend. Could be Floyd, could be Chuck, but today's not that day, and that's okay, because everybody everybody progresses at their own speed. So that's it. A couple interesting things. This episode, for one, sticks with this entire storyline for the entire episode. They don't always do that. Peanuts by Schulz, but they did it here, which is impressive, and it actually has sort of a beginning, middle, and end, right? In the beginning, there's a boy bugging her. In the middle, we find out who the boy is and why he's bugging her. And then they have, the breakup, I guess, for lack of a better word, at the end. So it's actually a complete story, which is also unusual. The storyline in the strip began July 19th, 1976. The Peanuts by Schulz episode, pretty much word for word, takes the several days of strips from that storyline. It takes the dialogue from that several days of strips. I'm just skimming through them now. If you want to go to Go Comics, starting July 19th, 1976, they're on the bus. They're at camp. This camp chow is good. I hit him with my lunch. Pushed him off the dock. Somebody's trying to scratch into the cabin. Nope, he's in the poison oak. I sent him to the dispensary. I think in the episode they just called the nurse's office, but in the strip in 76 they called it the dispensary. Well, then it's broken up with a Sunday strip. It has nothing to do with it. And then here's the interesting thing. In the strip on July 26, 1976, we get a look at this kid, who we're going to later find out is Floyd. The kid looks nothing like the Floyd in the animated episode. In the animated episode, he is taller than Marcy and Permit Patty. Long sleeve shirt, long sleeve pants, all kind of a rust color. And his hair, like I said, is kind of like Linus's hair, just shorter. In the strip, he's wearing the exact same outfit that Linus would wear, but he has sort of a mess of dark hair, completely covering his head. Kind of like Shermie's hair, if Shermie didn't comb his hair. And he's about the same height as Marcy. Totally different look. I looked him up. He did make it into the Peanuts family album. Interestingly, his entry in the album appears right after Marcy. Doesn't appear that he appears again. The album just notes that his first appearance was July 26, 1976, and gives a little summary of his relationship with Marcy at camp, and that's about it. I'm guessing he never appears again. So there you go. I enjoyed this episode. There were some good lines. The bit about Permit Patty asking Floyd if they should take another picture for the insurance is pretty good. I think The standard line about how "don't call me sir" is deployed pretty well in this episode. Marcy playing against type is pretty good, right? You wouldn't normally think of her as someone who would be clobbering people, but she does. So that's kind of interesting. And like I said, it reminded me of that Apple TV special about Marcy, which I really enjoyed. May go watch it again sometime. If you guys want to weigh in on this episode of Peanuts by Schulz, Marcy, about anything really, you know how to contact me. And if you don't, stay tuned until the end of the episode.
Oh my, look at all this. The next step is up to you? No? Young ladies in review. Oh boy, nah. Restful sleep? Nah. How to keep your husband happy? Say, hi there. I didn't see you there. Sean is the name. What's that? Am I going through my spam emails? Well, that's a good question, but no, I'm not going through my spams. I'm going through my database of weird records so that I can schedule my upcoming podcast episodes. What podcast, you ask? Wow, you are full of excellent questions. My podcast is called My Weird Record Collection. Just like anybody else who listens to records, I have the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Michael Jackson, Vince Guaraldi, some comedy stuff. But unlike others who listen to vinyl, I also have some of those, well, oddball albums you might find in the miscellaneous divider that you see in the used record stores. Those records that the stores literally don't know where to file because they're, well, weird. Oftentimes these records tell you about a time when YouTube did not exist, so you had to get your how-tos and exercises and whatnot from somewhere. Might as well be a record. Even better, quite often these oddities have unintentional humor.
Now for those tender little white breasts.
Every month on the 15th, a new episode of My Weird Record Collection drops. And I tell you as much of the story behind these weird records as I can. I also wax philosophical about record collecting and offer you my own tips and tricks. Check it out. My Weird Record Collection is on all the major podcast providers and on the social media under the handle of My Weird Records. Catch you on the 15th.
Now there is a man-sized bite.
Peanuts Worldwide, Wild Brain, and Apple TV Plus have gotten together to create quite a bit of new animated Peanuts content. They did Peanuts, they did Snoopy in Space, they did The Snoopy Show, and a number of standalone specials. And of course, the latest series is Camp Snoopy. Season 1 is up on Apple TV Plus now. I don't know yet about Season 2. I think the most recent thing I read is that, yes, there is a Season 2 coming, but I have no idea when still. But Season 1 is there. And at this point, we've talked about 8 of the episodes, and today we're going to talk about Episode 9. The series is directed, as always, by Rob Boudelier, friend of the show, I think I can say. Rob Boudelier, music by Jeff Morrow. It opens, as it always does, with the bouncy, very non-Guaraldi sounding Camp Snoopy theme. Fiddly, well, it kind of sounds like square dance music, actually. It's not. I mean, I guess you could try to do square dancing. Did any of you, when you were kids in school, in music class, have to square dance? I did. When I was in grade school, that was one of the units in music class, was, for some reason, square dancing. Maybe there was a crossover with PE? I don't know what the deal is, but that just occurred to me. I thought I would share it. If anyone wants to weigh in on square dancing, email me at charliebrownpodcast@gmail.com.
I can't stand this. I'm going to get a glass of water.
What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Peanuts. Primarily the Beagle Scouts marching, finally, up a hill, planting their flag, and then Snoopy taking a nap on top of his tent. And that's, I think at that point, we get the title card, Camp Snoopy. And we open on sort of a cold opening preamble kind of thing. And we see, in fact, Snoopy asleep on top of his tent. Little, cartoony Z's floating in the air as he's, snoring peacefully. It's the middle of the night. Everyone's asleep. Sort of soft piano music in the background. And then we see a thing that is maybe not as adorable as Woodstock walking along with a balloon, which is the most freaking adorable thing ever. But it's pretty darn close. It's a shot of Woodstock in a sleeping bag, which is almost the most adorable thing ever. I snapped a shot of the screen and I will try to remember to put that up on social media if I haven't, because it's pretty darn cute. But he is being disturbed by all the Z's floating away from Snoopy's snoring. This episode's a little bit, it's cartoony, right? Actual physical Z's from someone snoring. That's a comic thing. And there's a lot of weird little, what's the word that I want? A little, I keep trying to say meta. It's not meta. Surreal. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of little surreal things happening in throughout the episode, starting with all these Z's attacking Woodstock. In fact, the Z's are so rude that one of them actually pushes Woodstock, sleeping bag and all, off of the top of his tent. Why Woodstock also was sleeping on top of his tent, I don't know, other than he wants to be like Snoopy, I guess. So now, sort of sleepily, Woodstock goes inside his tent, puts on his Beagle Scout hat and his little neckerchief thing, and comes out of the tent with a butterfly net, goes over to Snoopy and scoops up the Z's coming out of his nose, I guess, and then takes him over and buries him in a hole in the ground. Job done. He tries to go back to sleep, but then he is inundated by a flurry of more Z's coming from his fellow scouts, and he is, in fact, buried in a pile of Z's. End of the cold open. Then we get to one of the two main episodes. As we know, the Camp Snoopy has two stories, and then in the middle, there's a story where it's learning something from the Beagle Scout Handbook. So the first story is called Bedheads and Beagle Care. It's written by Craig Brown and directed by Melanie Daigle. It opens with Charlie Brown in sailor hat, looking out over the lake there at camp, feeling very peaceful. There's nothing like a lake at dawn for peace, quiet, and reflection. But then from off camera, we hear Snoopy sort of grunting and groaning, grumbling, and we go over to him and we see that he's reading through the Beagle Scout Handbook. Charlie Brown surmises that he's probably looking for another badge for his scouts to work on. Of course, the whole premise of the show is that the scouts are out here, the Beagle Scouts are going to be disbanded, or at least this troop is, and so Snoopy's got to, pump up the earning of the Beagle Scout badges. So he's looking for another one to work on, and he can't find anything that he's happy with. Charlie Brown's like, well, let me take a look. So he starts flipping through, and he's like, well, here's one. The Beagle Care Badge. Show your best beagle love and attention with the care they deserve. Snoopy is immediately drawn to that one, obviously. He imagines himself on in my notes here, I couldn't think of the right word. Not a duvet, right? That's just a big fancy comforter quilt thing. Well, it's not that next thing I wrote, because that's not even a word. I guess kind of like a divan kind of thing. A long backless sofa. So it's like those fancy couches, like a fainting couch maybe kind of thing. That when people imagine themselves being pampered and fed grapes and things, the thing they're laying on. You know what I'm talking about. So he imagines himself on that, being pampered by the Beagle Scouts fluttering around him, fanning him, keeping him cool, that kind of thing. So he's into this, so he heads off to get to work. So Charlie Brown's like, finally, peace and quiet. But then we hear the irritating blat of a tuba. It sounded like this.
Good grief.
And the camera pulls back, and we see that it's Marcy getting in some early morning tuba practice. Meanwhile, over at the girls' cabin, everyone is just kind of waking up. Sally's already up. She's gone to brush her teeth. She's feeling very relaxed. The camera angle is weird because we're seeing her face as she's walking along, but not the rest of her. She's feeling pretty good. She's got a good night's rest. Slept like a baby. But we're seeing that as she's walking through the cabin, the other girls are sort of disturbed by what they're seeing. Don't know why at first. But then we see Sally looking in a mirror, and we see that her hair, which already is sort of an odd hairdo, those hair horn type things, but now it's all crazy messed up. One horn is up, the other's down. It's kind of crazy looking. Major bedhead happening, hence the title of the episode. Outside, Schroeder and Franklin are bowled over, literally knocked to the ground by the volume of the shriek that emanates from the girls' cabin. Franklin's like, oh, that's the unmistakable cry of someone with camp hair. So back inside, Lucy and Naomi? It's been a while since I did one of these episodes. I think her name is Naomi. Are taking in the damage. Sally just can't stand it. It's bad enough there's no TV out here, now this. But Naomi, the one who kind of looks like Eudora, wears a little beanie type thing. It's not that bad, she says. I'll brush it out for you. So she gets out a brush, starts brushing. Sally's like, is it working? The brush has just gotten tangled up in the hair and won't do anything. Meanwhile, we hear Charlie Brown's voice narrating from the handbook as the Beagle Scouts are doing their thing. The most important thing in beagle care is to make sure your beagle is properly fed. Snoopy interprets this as, you gotta have a nice checkered tablecloth over a table, or in this case, a big tree stump, and there's a platter full of dog biscuits. I own a beagle. Well, a beagle-pug mix, and I can totally relate to everything in this story. Snoopy gestures at his mouth. He not only wants the biscuits, he wants to be fed. So the scouts try to use a fork to catapult biscuits into his mouth, but they just kind of bounce off his head or his chest or whatever, and it's not working. The narration says, a well-fed beagle is a happy beagle, and Snoopy is not pleased. At the girls' cabin, Naomi tries to blow dry Sally's hair, but it's not working. Lucy's like, power, we need more power. Naomi shrieks, it only has 2 settings. Sally is worried. Is it looking any better? And Lucy's like, well, look at the positive. It's not any worse. The next part of beagle care, we're told, is making sure that your canine companion is relaxed and happy, which in Snoopy's brain means you enjoy a nice cup of tea while relaxing under a tree, being groomed. He has curlers in his hair, the hair on his head, cucumbers over his eyes, but all of a sudden he gets frustrated because the scouts are trying to file his nails and brush his teeth, and I guess it's too much or something. And then he starts running away when he sees that they've gotten out of bathtub, right? As much as he wants to be pampered, he's still a dog, so he freaks out when he sees the bathtub. Back to girls' cabin, the boys have gotten into this Sally hair problem. Franklin asks, have you tried a different brush? Pepper Patty, maybe some cold would work. Schroeder's like, or heat. And Linus says, why don't you go jump in the lake? Sally misinterprets his tone. Why don't you go jump in the lake? She yells back. And it kind of knocks him over. Franklin catches him. Franklin's like, I think it was a sincere suggestion. Sally gets it now. Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you, my sweet Babu. Linus straightens his shirt, very prim and proper, and says very simply, the line reading is great. It's not protesting or anything. He just says very simply, I'm not her sweet Babu. And then he walks away as Franklin and Pepper and Patty look at each other, very confused by what they just saw. Trivia time here. Sally first called Linus Sweet Babu in the strip on January 27, 1977. Down at the lake, Sally's got her swimsuit on and her water wings, but the lifeguard in, full-on adult trombone voice stops her. Not going to let her swim because the water's just too rough today. Marcy offers some sad tuba in support.
Even nature is conspiring against me.
But then has an idea. Meet me in the rec cabin, she says. Meanwhile, Snoopy is running from the scouts, intent on giving him a bath, right? They want that badge. Snoopy manages to pull a tree stump out of the ground somehow and use it as camouflage, as a disguise. Meanwhile, at the rec cabin, Marcy pulls out a trunk of costumes from Camp Skit Night. Here, try this, she says. Puts one of those English barrister wigs, the powdered white wigs that they wear in court traditionally. Puts that on Sally's head, and they both agree, objection sustained. And then they try it, a multicolored clown wig. Sally, in a pretty good line reading here, is like, I worry that this will create the unrealistic expectation that I'll be funny. Marcy's like, okay, maybe a wig's not the way to go. Let's try a different approach. So they try a big 10-gallon cowboy hat. The internet says that the term 10-gallon hat is a misnomer that refers to the size of the hat's crown, not its capacity. The name likely comes from Spanish words related to the hat's appearance, such as galon, or braid, or 10 gallon. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. Very handsome. A hat with a tall enough crown to display 10 of those braided ribbons which were used as decorations or badges. All right. If any cowboys are listening and want to correct me on all of that, please do. Somehow the hat launches itself off Sally's head and back into the trunk. I would, at that point, stop worrying about hair and worry about the possessed hat living in a trunk, but that's just me. So now Sally's needs some time alone, and she goes off and sits on a log, and filthy Snoopy emerges from the bushes behind her. Sally's like, hiding out too, eh, Snoopy? He looks at poor Sally and laughs, and then leaves. Naomi appears, asks, how Sally's doing, and Naomi's like, she really doesn't see the big deal. We only get so many days at camp. Why waste them hiding out? You don't have camp hair. True, Naomi agrees, but check this out. She takes off her beanie hat thing. Camp hair meet hat hair. And her hair is a little messy, right? She wears that hat all the time. Sally giggles at this, and Naomi's like, it's okay, laugh. It's fine. I don't mind. Let's just go enjoy our day. So now Snoopy, who's absolutely filthy, makes his way back to the scout camp, runs inside his tent to hide, and immediately falls into the bathtub. Pretty quickly, though, he decides, it's lots of warm water and bubbles and stuff, and not so bad. He emerges in a bathrobe, he's all nice and clean, he feels pretty good, but then he gets his own camp hair on top of his head, kind of curls up real crazy. The end. Beagle Scout Handbook time. Can You Be a Beagle Scout Pathfinder? Written by Jocelyn Getty, directed by Red Sorensen, and they're going to learn about navigating in nature. The voiceover, I believe as usual, is Charlie Brown. To be a Beagle Scout, you must become a master pathfinder, relying on the environment to find your way. And we see that Snoopy is leading some of the campers, Lucy and Charlie Brown and Linus, I think, and Schroeder, maybe, and some other ones. Lucy's like, how do you know where we're going? Snoopy just makes a gesture like, don't worry, I got this. One of the suggestions from the handbook is to climb to a higher vantage point, which Snoopy does by sitting on Chuck's head. And he's like, wouldn't you prefer something a little taller? Even the wind can guide you, the handbook says. So Snoopy throws a bunch of leaves up in the air to see how the wind moves them, but they just get all over Charlie Brown. They stop walking, and Lucy's relieved to finally have a break. She gets ready to take a drink out of her canteen, but Snoopy grabs it and pours the water out of the canteen into his hat. And the voiceover tells us that when all else fails, you can create a compass with some water, a leaf, and a needle, which he produces from somewhere and places on the leaf, floating in the water. He stares at this for a long time, and the leaf's just kind of floating gently around. Watches this a long time until Franklin finally points out that actually you have to magnetize the needle. Snoopy just kind of shrugs and throws the water all over Charlie Brown. The handbook says, use your head and sometimes your nose, and you're bound to find exactly what you're looking for. Snoopy starts digging all of a sudden, and Franklin's like, oh, well, maybe we misjudged you, because it seems like they've gotten wherever they were going. And Lucy's all excited now. Maybe it's buried treasure. And it is, sort of, if you're a dog, because Snoopy just digs up a bone. Ugh, everyone shouts. And then, as with all these handbook things, the handbook tip segment is done, and then we get a little quick tidbit of something else before we get to the next story. And this one is Franklin and Charlie Brown walking along with their fishing poles, and the Beagle Scouts walk past them, led by Snoopy as always, and they are carrying their Beagle Scout flag. They're headed somewhere to plant their flag. Franklin takes all this in, and he's like, you ever wonder what it'd be like to have a normal dog who does normal stuff, like sit and roll over? Charlie Brown just lets out a big sigh. Constantly. It made me think of a storyline. Maybe it was from an animated special, or maybe it was from the strip, where Franklin was thinking about getting a dog. Yeah, I don't remember a lot about it. Maybe I'll go look for that later. So now we see the Beagle Scouts are indeed planting their flag, but Snoopy is disappointed that there's no wind to make the flag billow in the breeze. So he blows his trumpet, and they march up a hill. Now all of a sudden it's super windy. So windy that it blows the flag and the Scouts completely off the top of the hill. And that's the end of this little Beagle Scout handbook bit. All right, second and final proper story. This one's called The Great Gold Rush, written by Carly Deneur, directed by Steve Evangelatos. Kids are all crowded around the bulletin board, and they've learned that it's time for the annual Gold Rush scavenger hunt. Charlie Brown explains that the counselors hide gold-painted rocks around camp, and then the team that finds the most of these gold rocks wins. So Sally decides, oh, is that like an Easter egg hunt? And Charlie Brown's like, well, Easter egg hunts don't have a winner. Sally says, spoken like someone who's never won one. Lucy tells Linus, stick with me. I'll find all the gold you could ever want. Franklin declares that he has a foolproof system, to which Patty responds, me too. I see gold, I pick it up. And then to Marcy, she's like, I can't believe you're going to sit this one out. But Marcy, indeed, is not going to go on this gold rush hunt. Instead, she's going to read a book about the Klondike Gold Rush. It's really, just from a story point of view, it's really just a way to get some exposition into the episode about the gold rush, but I feel like they could have worked that in with Marcy not making the odd decision to not be partners with Peppermint Patty. I don't know. The Klondike Gold Rush was a mass migration of prospectors to the Klondike region of Canada's Yukon Territory between 1897 and 1899. It began after the discovery of gold on Rabbit Creek, a tributary of the Klondike River, in 1896 by Skookum Jim and his family. News made it to Seattle and San Francisco the following year, triggering a stampede of around 100,000 people seeking their fortune. So Marcy tells the viewer basically what I just said, the famous 1890s gold rush in the Alaskan and Yukon panhandle. Prim Patty's like, I don't know what cooking utensils have to do with anything. Meanwhile, the Beagle Scouts are hiking. Some of the birds are getting kind of tired and bored. Snoopy finally spots the plant he was looking for. They're out identifying plants and then checking them off on pages in the handbook. Woodstock's kind of into it, like Snoopy is, but the others are, like I said, getting kind of bored and tired. One of the birds stumbles on one of these fake gold nuggets, but he doesn't realize it's fake. We see Marcy reading from her book. Coincidentally, about the same time the bird's finding this gold nugget, she's reading from her book, telling us that the first few nuggets found in the Klondike fueled imaginations. Franklin's marking grids on his map of the camp, which Pepper and Patty thinks looks suspiciously like homework. Lucy, her strategy is to relax in a deck chair and not do anything, except drink lemonade. Linus feels compelled, and this might be one of my favorite lines, feels compelled to point out that it's a gold rush, not a gold take your time. Lucy's like, don't worry, the gold is always in the same place. It's either in a hollowed out tree or under a suspicious bunch of sticks. Linus thinks that sounds like cheating, to just sit there, let everyone else run around and search, and then go right to where apparently the gold always is. Lucy, though, doesn't see the problem. I think of it as being ahead of the game. Sally and Charlie Brown are out looking. Sally's asking if there are jelly beans, too, along with these gold nuggets, or chocolates with the creamy centers. Charlie Brown tries again to explain this isn't like an Easter egg hunt. We're looking for gold. So Sally's trying to get it. It's like, oh, like those chocolate coins wrapped in gold foil. I love those too. Snoopy is out still spotting plants, but the bird who found the gold nugget shows it to another one, and they sneak away as Marcy narrates that, the prospectors were seeking their fortune. Lucy heads to likely hiding spot number 1, Old Reliable. Shoves her hand into a tree stump, nearly snagging one of the little birds who has gotten there first and found the gold nuggets. But, so she doesn't find anything in there. The counselors must have switched it up. How dare they make this an actual challenge? Lucy is, incensed by this. Marcy narrates, the sight of others striking it rich made others envious. It was the start of gold fever. Franklin explains to Pepper and Patty that the grids on his map are not to show where the gold is, but rather where it isn't. Pepper and Patty says, I can tell you where it isn't. In our hands. Sally's finally gotten this gold hunt thing figured out. So we trade the gold for chocolate, she says. I think Charlie Brown just kind of sighs at that. Lucy's still mad that the gold wasn't where it always is. You don't just hide gold in the same place for years, then change it up. Where's the sport in that? Linus points out, isn't that actually more sporting? Less talking, more searching, she says. Marcy again comments, gold fever overpowered the imagination. The birds have done a really good job of getting to the gold first. They are now literally standing on a little hill of fake gold. Marcy describes how the gold rushers started to turn on each other and at that moment, we see the birds start fighting over who gets this gold. Franklin can't believe that his grid system has failed. And Pepper and Patty's like, if it's any consolation, I always believed your system would fail. I like that line too. Lucy looks traumatized that they haven't found anything, and she's just glad that it's over. Snoopy and Woodstock try to stop the other birds from fighting, and Snoopy finally just scrapes off some of the gold paint on the rock to show them that it's fake. Marcy narrates that while some did prosper, the true story of the Klondike Gold Rush is dreams unfulfilled. The scouts bag up all of the fake gold and dump it next to Marcy. I'm not entirely sure why. The other campers see, though, that Marcy, who seemingly wasn't going to participate, has found all of the gold. Hey, Marcy won, they say. Wow. Pepper and Patty's like, maybe life's answers really are in books. Marcy, even though she has all this gold, feels bad keeping the prize herself. Maybe we should all split first prize. Sally asks what that is. And somebody says, it's a ribbon, but we can't share that. And then Sally's like, this is the worst Easter egg hunt ever. And they all kind of grump away. And that's the end. I like both these stories. I think I probably like the Gold Rush story better for personal entertainment reasons. But it's good. The camp's Pathfinder thing was pretty good. Although I got preoccupied in the back of my mind thinking about, well, how do you magnetize a needle when you're out in the middle of the woods? Actually, mostly what I thought of was MacGyver. How would he do it? And I don't remember him doing that on the show. I do remember him magnetizing a big lead rod, but I don't remember him magnetizing a needle. Probably did at some point. Apparently you magnetize a needle by rubbing a magnet against the needle in the same direction multiple times. Induced magnetism. But that assumes you're out in the woods with a magnet, I guess. And if you have a magnet, what do you need to magnetize a needle for? I don't know. Clearly, I was never a Beagle Scout. So I enjoyed this one, this Camp Snoopy, as I always do, right? It's peanuts. I don't ever rank the episodes or anything, so I'm not going to do that. But I had a good time watching this. The bedhead thing was good, too. I maybe didn't enjoy that one as much. It feels like a little bit thin of a premise. I could see it as sort of a B story in a story, but I don't know. I think the Gold Rush story works better. But that's just me. If you guys have thoughts about Camp Snoopy, please share them. that's our show. In a minute, I'll tell you what's up next episode. Thanks to Kevin McLeod and Incompetech.com for Creative Commons use of his songs, Spacewalker, Mining by Moonlight, and Hidden Agenda. Thanks to Henry Pope for the use of his Linus and Lucy remix, which you'll hear once I stop talking. Thanks to Nick Jones for the use of his song, 25% Off. Thanks to Sean Courtney for the This Month in Peanuts History theme. You can find It's a Podcast Charlie Brown on all sorts of podcast providers. Go ahead and just pick one, and then download it, and then download it at another one, and another one, and another one, just to prove that I'm right. Your 5-star review of the podcast at Apple Podcasts, for example, really helps other people find the podcast and makes me feel good. In fact, you should leave a review wherever they offer you that option. It helps me out. It helps get your opinions known. People love to have their opinions known. And it helps other people find out about a podcast that maybe they didn't know about but would really enjoy. If you don't happen to like this podcast, well, do it anyway. And just look at it as a cruel joke that you can play on others. You can like the It's a Podcast Charlie Brown Facebook page. You can follow us, you can follow us on Twitter at It's a Pod CB, but I pretty rarely look at the Twitter or X account anymore. I am also, It's a Podcast Charlie Brown is also on Instagram. I am Carnival of Glee. That's Carnival of Glee in a bunch of places, including Mastodon, Threads, Hive, Spoutable, and Tumblr, and Blue Sky. I'm probably mostly at Blue Sky as far as looking at stuff. I also check out Tumblr a fair amount. Threads, as I'm thinking about it, I'm over there on Threads at It's a Podcast Charlie Brown. So I also have an Atari Bytes account over there that I look at sometimes. Atari Bytes is my other podcast, which has been on quite a long hiatus, but there are over 300 episodes of that show that you can check out, where I talked about Atari games, but also give you an original short story that ostensibly is related to that game, but usually rarely has anything to do with the game. It's just whatever I felt like writing that week. You can check out that podcast, Atari Bytes, BYTES, wherever you like to get podcasts. And, let me know what you think of that show, too. It may come back with new episodes at some point when my life becomes less busy, although I don't see that happening anytime soon. Email me, if you so desire, at charliebrownpodcast@gmail.com. Check out the website, carnivalofgleecreations.com. There's stuff about this show, there's stuff about Atari Bytes, stuff about other stuff that I've worked on, including books that I have written, which you can possess if you so choose. Descriptions of the books, links to some of the places you can buy them, but if you don't like any of those options, fear not, because there are other places you can get them as well, if you so choose. You can also send me at charliebrownpodcast@gmail.com an audio file of your random strip of the month. As you know, in the second of the 2 episodes we do each month, we pick a strip at random, or it can be a strip that we really like or don't really like. We've done that too. We tell everybody when it was published, talked about it a little bit, and what we thought. So if you would like to join in on that, please do. I like doing the random strip of the month. It's kind of one of my favorite segments of the podcast, and I enjoy doing it, but I also really, really like it when you guys send me your random strips of the month. It's pretty simple. You don't need any fancy recording equipment. Just get out your phone. You are certain to have an app on your phone that will let you record audio. Tell us when the strip was published. Tell us, read the strip to us, and then tell us what you think. That's all you gotta do. And email it to me, and I'll play it on the show. I am looking forward to it. All right. There is a Patreon page for It's a Podcast Charlie Brown, but as you guys know by now, it's not really active. I do update it, but I'm not asking for any money. I may again someday, but I'm not at the moment. But if you want to check it out, keep an eye on it, give me some suggestions what might induce you to donate to the show, because I do have expenses related to this podcast. If, you feel inclined to financially help support the show, but you might like some sort of incentives to do that, let me know what they are, and maybe I'll put something together. All right. We are about done. All that's left is to tell you what's coming up next time on the podcast. It will be another random strip of the month. We will also have this month's news and feedback. So if you have comments or questions or things you'd like to discuss in and around the Peanuts universe, or, heck, pretty much anything, email me or contact me in one of those ways that we just talked about. We will also talk about Camp Snoopy, Season 1, Episode 10, and then we will get out of here, because that's how we do on the podcast. Meanwhile, just remember, of all the Charlie Browns in the world, you are the Charlie Browniest. So go eat some Valentine chocolate. And remember to take care of those around you and take care of yourself, because that's what Valentine's Day is about. See you later.
Just needs a little love.